Good morning, guys. All right, today we are going to be working on the 2000 Eurovan. These are great vans. There is one weak spot on them, though. Some of them, not all of them, have transmission issues. These vehicles are getting older, and the transmissions are getting harder to find, and they are getting expensive to fix. Like I say, not all of them have this issue. So if you have a van that doesn't have an issue, you may want to do a little preventative maintenance to prevent it from having an issue if it ever does. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to do a transmission service on it. I'm going to change the fluid in the filter, but I'm going to also add a transmission cooler. The cooler that these come with isn't the greatest. It's very small. So people opt to put in an aftermarket cooler, which should give you more cooling ability. So I'm going to show you what we're going to be using here, kind of explain it a little bit, and then I'll show you how we're going to get it done. Alright, so this is the cooler that we're going to be using. Okay, this is this comes from Tru-Cool, and these are also getting very hard to find. My wife had to search around all over the place to try to find one, but she actually did. This cooler measures 6 inches by 24 inches, and it's 3/4 of an inch thick. Now we opted to get the one that has the bypass also, which is this piece here. So in cooler temperatures, you're going to want to get the one with the bypass, just because it's going to heat up the transmission fluid quicker when it's cold out. This bypass opens up at about 180 degrees, and then it's fully open at about 205. Okay. So there are two different kits. One comes with the bypass, one comes without. Okay. The one with the bypass is LPD 4921, and then the one without it is LPD 4921-1. Now the kit does come with a bunch of hardware. However, we're not going to use this. There is a kit that you can buy from this company here, Sonex. I'll show you the part numbers on that. Okay, and what that kit comes with is different adapters, but it also has these here, very nice aluminum adapters. And the way the kit comes is set up to just tap into the hoses, but with this kit here, you're actually taking out the factory transmission cooler and replacing it directly off the transmission. Now the kit does come with these clamps, which is an issue, and part of the reason why a lot of people don't use this factory kit. They go with the Sonex kit. So if you look at the clamps, you can see there's a big difference in the clamp size. Okay, and that's the main failure, is the clamps will tend to not hold. These fittings are barbed, so it will hold. But what people do is they purchase these clamps here, and you can get however many you want, 8 or 10. I think I got like 10 of them, but they're a much thicker clamp, and they're going to hold a lot better. Okay, these O-rings, these go on the banjo bolts, which fit inside there, and then the smaller ones are going to go on the bottom inside the transmission where it seals like that. Okay, this will just get installed in line. I have a new transmission filter. I have a pump to pump the fluid in. I have a gallon and a quart of transmission fluid. It does come with a piece of hose. However, I don't feel that it's going to be enough, so I actually purchased some extra hose. These clamps are actually from a company called Ideal, and you can get them online. The gentleman that kind of steered me in this direction has a YouTube channel. He's called Texas Pigeon, so it's TXPIGEON. You can look him up. He installed one of these kits on a Rialta LV. These kits, though, like I say, are getting very hard to find. You used to be able to get them on like Go Westy and Oregon Performance and German Transaxle, but good luck trying to find one because there just aren't many around out there. All right, for the hose, I actually went and bought a 10-foot piece at my, I think I got it at O'Reilly's. And this is a Gates hose, and it says right on it, transmission oil cooler hose, SAE 100 R6 3/8 inch, 400 PSI. The Gates part number on this is 27059. So like I say, it does come with a piece, but I opted to grab a longer piece because that one piece isn't long enough, and I just want to make sure everything matches here. I know this is legit Gates transmission cooler hose line, so we'll be using that. Alright, so the first thing we got to do is get this van up in the air. I do have ramps, however, I'm not going to use those. I'm going to use jack stands, and the reason being is I'm going to go underneath first and do the transmission filter. It's not going to have any fluid in it when I'm done, so I don't want to drive it off the ramp because I need to get it back on the ground so I can get access to under the hood here. So once I finish the pan gasket, then I will take it off the jack stands, drop it back down to the ground, and then we can work on the top. Alright, so you can see I got her up on the jack stands now. Next thing we got to do is we got to take this pan off of here so we can gain access to what we need to get to. So it's just a couple of bolts holding it on the side, so let me get that taken off and we'll proceed to the next step. Alright, so once you get this pan dropped down, I'm just going to put a drain pan inside of this one. You can't really remove this undershield because it has to drop way down to unhinge the back hinges on there, but that's okay. Just drop it down on the ground like this, and then you can put your drain pan inside of here. This is the transmission here, so we're going to take this pan off. That's where your filter's at. And then once we get that set, then we'll work on getting the transmission cooler installed. This is your fill hose right here. There's a cap you got to take off in order to fill the fluid up through there. So first step, let's get this pan off. Let's see what we got inside there. The good news is it's not all soaking wet with transmission fluid under here, so that's a good sign. So let's get that pan down, see what we're up against here. Okay, so the bolt heads on the shield are 13 millimeter. The bolts on the transmission pan are 10 millimeter. So you can see we have the bolts out on the sides and the front. I left 2 in on the back, so that way we can kind of pry this open and drain some of this fluid out before we actually drop the pan. So I'm going to let this drain for a minute. We'll get the other bolts out, and then we'll get this pan down. Alright, now when you pull the drain plug out of the transmission pan, you get this little 5 millimeter Allen. But once you get that out, you're going to see that no fluid's coming out, and that's because this is the fill tube, which is up inside the same hole, again 5 millimeter Allen. So take the drain plug out and then reach back in there and pull this out, and that's going to allow the fluid to drain out. Okay. Alright, once you get the pan down, you can see here's your filter here, and that basically just pops off. It's not even bolted in, it's just got an O-ring that holds it in there. So we'll get that one popped off, and we'll get the new one popped on. Alright, this filter does have an O-ring on it right here. However, it always sticks up in there. You can see the orange O-ring there. You got to make sure you pry that out before you try installing the new filter. Alright, so here's the new filter. You can see it's got the new O-ring on it. I popped the old ring out of the transmission, and this basically is just going to pop right in there. Okay, so you can see that just lines up like that. Okay, and that just fits in there like that. So let's get the pan all cleaned up, and then we'll get that back installed. Alright, so we got the pan down. There is some little metal flaking in here, very fine. I guess that's to be expected with 150,000 miles on it. there is a magnet here that's collecting some of the debris. So we're gonna get this pan all cleaned up, and we'll get the new gasket on there and get that reinstalled on the vehicle. Alright, you can see we got the pan nice and clean now. We got the magnet all cleaned up, so everything's good. Make sure there's no debris in here. Alright, and then we have the new gasket. It does have a channel on it so that it fits over the lip of the pan. It does have these little spacers in it. Some come already pre-assembled, some you have to push them in there. And that just keeps the gasket from crushing when you put it on. So we're just going to fit this on here. This is kind of nice because a lot of these, they just sit on there and they don't grab on anyway. And then they get all twisted and makes it really difficult to get it lined up. Okay, so once we get that on there, we'll crawl back underneath and then we'll get that bolted back up. Okay, at this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fill tube, I'm going to drop this back in here. Just easier to do now while it's all apart. Screw this back in. And you don't have to crank this down, it just needs to be, like finger tight. Okay, once that seats, you're good. And then I'm going to take the drain plug and just kind of temporarily put that in there for now until we're ready to drain it out. Okay, now we can get the pan back installed. Okay, so we got the pan all reinstalled. I believe the spec on those is 12 Newton meters. Tighten at your own risk. I have broken bolts before going by torque specs, so I just kind of go by feel at this point. So that is all set. So we're going to leave this belly pan down for now so that we can, there's your fill tube on here. So I'm going to need to gain access to that after to fill it up. Looks like there's your oil filter there. I'm not sure what that is. If you guys know, leave a comment below. I haven't researched it yet. Let's see, we got your AC compressor, you got your alternator, starters right up here. So everything's pretty accessible from underneath here, which is nice. Alright, so now we're going to start on the cooler. So we'll get up on top and see what we can do there. Alright, so what we got to do is we got to access the top of the transmission. I don't know if you can see this, but there is... That's the banjo bolts that you got to get out. There's one there, and there's one behind it. Okay. So it's a little tricky getting in there. You got to have some long extensions and just kind of sneak your way down in between the hoses and that. First thing I want to do is I want to crack those loose just to make sure I can get them out before we start installing everything else. Alright, that went a little easier than I thought. So you're going to sneak a extension down in there. You got to kind of stick your hand down in here and just feel for it. But once you get it in there, let's see, pull this off of here. Alright, so what I used was, I just used my torque wrench for leverage and a couple of extensions and then a swivel and then a T8, not a T8, but a H8 hex head. And that worked out pretty good. So one, you can go down through here, the other one you got to go through the back. So now that those are cracked loose, I know we're good. And the piece that those are bolted into is actually the old transmission cooler. I'm trying to get a shot here, I don't know if you can see this. I'll get you a better view once I get in there and get it out. But basically that's the old transmission cooler, which is pretty inadequate. So we're going to start taking some things apart here. The next thing I got to do is take the grill off. There's a couple of screws on top, a couple on the bottom. get a little more access there. Okay, so we got a couple of screws here somewhere. Alright, we're going to take these top ones off. Two down here. Alright, now that we got the grill off, this is where your cooler is going to go, down in here. Alright, we got to make a couple of slight modifications to the grill just to accommodate it. We're going to run the lines in through here. Alright, so first thing we need to do is start assembly of the actual cooler lines. Alright, first thing we're going to do, we're going to take these adapters, put a little pipe tape on them, and we're going to do like 2 wraps. Okay, so alright, once we get that wrapped, then we're going to thread them into here. Got a wrench and tighten those. These are 9/16. Okay, you want to get them on there good and snug. Just make sure that the pipe doesn't come through. You see that? Make sure it doesn't stick through there so that it interferes with the banjo bolt. Okay, that's good and snug. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's give it a good snug like that. Alright, so this one's going to face that way, and then when I put the other one, this piece is going to be in the inside also, so they're kind of facing each other. That way they're not interfering with anything. Alright, so at this point we have the 2 fittings, and then we have the lines coming forward. We have them coming out of the grill, just right on the side of the radiator here, because these lines are going to hook up over here to the new cooler. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to get those banjo bolts out, and we're going to get these fittings secured in there. Okay, so what I found was once you use the long extensions to crack them loose, you can just put your Allen key on a very small ratchet like this, and then you can go in there and loosen it, and then once it's loose, you can just reach down and pull it out, and there's your banjo bolt. So you're going to replace this O-ring here, and then there's another O-ring. I'll show you where that's going to go. Okay, so that's one, and then let me get the other one out here. Slip that back in there. So that was the back one. Let me get the front one now. Can't really see too much in here, so you're just going to kind of feel your way around. I think the hardest part about this is actually going to be getting the old cooler out of there. just because it's so tight. Now, one of the things is this second banjo bolt, when you're pulling it out, this O-ring is actually holding it in the housing. So you actually have to pop it out to get that bolt to come loose. So let me see if I can get down in there. Show you what I mean once I can get this thing out of here. Okay. And there's the other bolt. So what I was explaining was this sits inside of the housing like this. And when you unloosen it, it comes loose, but the housing lifts up a little bit with it, and you can't get the bolt out. So if you put a bar or something on here and you smack this, it pops it up like that, and then you're able to grab it and pull it out. Alright, so the next thing is there's two hoses connected to the old cooler. You can see this piece down in here that I'm moving is the actual cooler. And there is one hose right here. And then there's another hose. Hard to see in here. This other hose back in here. So we're going to have to disconnect those two hoses in order to get this cooler out of here. Alright, so what I did, I went down in there and I sliced one of the lines with a knife. You can see I cut it close to the fitting. This way it's going to give you more room for swinging this thing out of here, because the longer the lines are, the more it's going to get hooked up on stuff. So I cut this line as short as I could, and I'm starting to wiggle this thing out of here. I still have the other line connected right now because I couldn't really get in there to cut it without fear of damaging something else. So I'm going to try to wiggle this out of here, and then once I get it out far enough, then I can cut it. Alright, so once I got it far enough up, I was able to cut the other line, which is right here. Okay, so now that both lines are cut, I'll see if I can get this thing out of here. Alright, just take your time, just kind of wiggle it around, finesse it. I'm going to move some of these hoses out of the way. But she comes out. Alright, so this is the old cooler that they use, which isn't that big, and I guess it doesn't really do that good a job. So that's why everybody replaces them with the aftermarket ones. Alright, so what I got to do now is the two hoses that I cut, I need to connect those. Okay, and when you get your kit, that's what this fitting is for with the clamps. So we're going to connect those two hoses that I cut. And then we'll fit in the new fittings with the banjo bolts. Alright, so these banjo bolts that we pulled out, you want to take these O-rings off. Get rid of those. Okay, and then the new ones, let's put a little oil for my fingers on there. Okay, so those are all set. Just gonna wipe them clean, make sure there's no dirt on those. Now what's gonna happen is these banjo bolts are gonna go in here like this, and this is gonna take up the space of the cooler that we just pulled out. There is a small O-ring also. Grab that. And that's going to go on this side. But when you look down at the transmission, you're going to see there's a little ring in there that this O-ring is going to fall into, and then you're going to seal it up with that. So let me get the other one set, and then we'll snake that down in there. Okay, now if you look on the transmission, you're going to see there's an O-ring right there. We got to pop that out, and that's where the new O-ring goes in. Okay, so we get that one out. Okay, that's the old O-ring. So we got to pop both of those out, and then we got to put the new O-rings, and then we'll slip the adapters into place. Alright, so what I did, this fitting, I know this is very difficult to see, but this fitting goes down there, and you have to position the hoses so that they're not going in all kinds of weird kinked up angles. So I tried to run it underneath what I could, and then come out over here, and then come up and into the out through the side of the radiator. So I'm going to run both of those hoses down low as I can, and then come out this way with them. Okay, so here you can see the front one, and I just snuck down the line. You can see it right there. And we just got to put the banjo bolt in there and then get it to seat in that O-ring without it moving, and then we'll get that torqued down. Okay, so I now have both of the adapters in place. One of these lines, this line here, if I can get in here better. This line here is kind of close to this clamp right here, so there's a bracket here with a hole in it. I'm going to just lift this up a little bit and zip tie it to this bracket just so that it's not rubbing on that clamp. I don't need this thing to wear a hole through and then cause a failure down the line, so we'll get that secured. Okay, so the next thing I'm doing is I'm just taking some of this, it's actually double-sided tape, but I'm leaving the plastic on one side, and I'm just putting some on the corners of the cooler so that way when it's in there, if it's making contact with the radiator or the condenser or whatever it's going to hit, it's not going to be metal to metal contact. So we'll just put some of these on there for a little insulation. Okay, because this is going to sit like this, and I'll just put a piece in the middle also. So that'll just give it a little protection from rubbing up against anything, okay? Alright, next thing I want to do is install this bypass valve. So it does have a flow, it says flow to cooler, flow to transmission. So we're going to have the pressure coming out of the transmission, which is going to be the fitting in the back. We'll hook that line to here, this will go to the cooler, this will come out of the cooler and go back to the other line. Alright, so basically we're just going to be tapping into these two lines here. Alright, so let me figure out where I want to install that, and we'll get that taken care of. Alright, so I took a bit of extra time with this because I want to make sure that everything is protected. So anywhere where there's a point where it might contact something, I took another piece of hose and slid it and wrapped it around for an insulator, just so that you can see here also, just so that I don't have any points of contact where it's going to wear through the hose. So just take you a little bit of extra time to do that. It'll save you a lot of headaches in the long run. I do have my bypass installed. It's right here. It's kind of out of the way. It's not really contacting anything here. So I think we're good there. And now we'll just get started on the actual cooler. Alright, so at this point I have the cooler in. It's all attached. I have the hoses running down through here. Those are attached. Again, I did put some additional hose installations just for any spot that might be rubbing, just so we don't have an issue. The cooler is now securely in there. I have the padding on the back of them just to protect them from the metal to metal. It's in there nice and secure. So next step is we are going to top off the transmission fluid. We got to put about 4 quarts in it, let it run for a while till it gets up to about 105, and then we'll pull the drain plug and let it come out the overflow. Once it starts trickling out of the overflow, we know we're at a good level, and then we can button things up and take it for a ride. Alright, so let me get the fluid filled up. That'll be the next step. Alright, so this is the plug on the front of the transmission where you fill it, and the way you get it off, it's a little weird. There's tabs on either side. There's one on this side, one on this side, and you have to stick something very small on either side and like squeeze them together to pull these tabs out. Once you do, then you're able to pull it out. Alright, so now that I got that out, we're going to go ahead and pump the fluid in there. Alright guys, so this is going to be by far the easiest and cheapest way to fill your transmission. There's all kinds of pumps and adapters and all kinds of shit that they want you to buy, and you don't need that. Go down to Home Depot, get yourself one of these pressure sprayers for like the garden or whatever. Fill it up with your transmission fluid. Take the wand, cut off the end, put a piece of hose on here, snake it down into the tube, pressurize it, squeeze the trigger, good to go. Alright, just have your hose come up with the trigger, go down, and then have the hose feed down right into the fill tube on the transmission. And that's as easy as that. So we're going to pressurize this thing, we're going to put 4 quarts in, we're going to let this thing warm up. Alright, we got pressure in there, just squeeze the handle, and the fluid's nice and clear. You can't really see it, but it is pumping in there. And we will just go ahead and drain this tank because that's 4 quarts in there. And once that's full, we'll get her warmed up. Alright, so at this point, we're pretty much done. What I did was started the vehicle, ran it, got the transmission temperature up to about 105. You want to shift it through the gears, make sure everything's flowing through. Once it's up to temp, you take the drain plug out of the pan and just wait until it trickles out. Put the plug back in and should be good to go. So I'm going to put the grill back on, and I'm just going to kind of wash things down a little bit. You got some fluids underneath, left it a little bit wet under there, so I'm going to kind of power wash it all down, and then we'll take it for a ride, and I think we should be good. So there's the new cooler all installed, and hopefully that extends the life of the transmission for us. Like I said, we haven't had any problems, and hopefully we won't. Alright guys, let's take it for a ride, and we'll see how she is. Alright, well, we're taking her for a test drive, and everything seems to be great. She's shifting normally like she should, and temperatures are good, and everything seems to be fine. So, alright, so we got the cooler in there. That is going to help keep the transmission temperatures cooler, hopefully extend the life of the transmission, not have any issues with it. Alright, so if you're thinking about doing a training service, or if you're thinking about adding a cooler, that's pretty much how it's done. It took me, I don't know, maybe 6 hours or so. But you just want to take your time and
you know, make sure you're doing everything correctly, making sure everything's routed properly. You don't want to have anything chafing on anything where it's going to cut a hole in the line. Make sure your fluid level is correct. And yeah, that's about it. So, alright guys, hope that helps you out if you're thinking about doing any kind of training service on your Eurovans. So you guys have a great day. If you like the video, give a thumbs up, a like, a share, subscribe if you haven't, and I will catch you guys on the next one.